From as far back as I can remember, I had an interest in airplanes. My father had an interest as well, but never built any model planes until after I started in the hobby. He did, however, build me an airplane tricycle. What I enjoy about model aviation is a variety of different types of model airplanes and the engineering challenges to get successful flights. The major types of model airplanes are free flight, control line, and radio control. Many model airplane enthusiasts will only fly one of the major types, but I fly all three. I really enjoy building balsa models, but also fly ready-to-fly models or buy used models. Although I have tried helicopters and quadcopters, it did not hold my interest like airplanes. I enjoy some competition, but I think I am more of a sport flyer. I try to promote my interest in model aviation to anyone that will listen, especially kids. I'm creating this video to show how I have become interested in many aspects of model aviation, and I hope to inspire other people to share their path through model aviation. Crashing model airplanes is part of it, and I've crashed my share, especially when learning something new. Radio control is very reliable now, and my skill has improved, so I rarely crash now, but it still happens. Faster free flight models often crash in the trimming process for the less experienced like me. Control line, you're flying so close to the ground there is little room for error. I feel model aviation has taught me so much in terms of logic, skills, and patience. In the learning process, there has always been people willing to help me, and I try to help beginners when I can. When I was a few years old, my father purchased a plastic control line model that looked like a Corsair, powered by a Winmac 049 engine. Before he tried it, I pushed it on the floor so much that the plastic fuel tank cracked. He repaired the tank and flew the plane on very short Dacron lines included with the plane. The first and probably last flight was short because he became dizzy after a few laps and fell to the ground. I remember on Sunday mornings our family would have breakfast at the Rochester Airport restaurant and then go to the nearby hangar for smaller aircraft. The picture was taken at the hangar during a public aviation event. I remember trying to build a Guillow Cessna 180 rubber-powered free flight, but thought the fuselage too difficult, so attached the wing and tail surfaces to a balsa stick. It did fly. Several years ago I built another Cessna 180, but that didn't fly too well because it was heavy. After this, I built the Guillow Super Cub, which is similar, but I built it lighter, and it flew well. I remember building a Carl Goldberg Stuntman 23 with a McCoy 049. I do not remember flying it, but remember other neighborhood kids were flying the PT-19 plastic control line, powered by the Cox Babe B 049. I purchased that engine and built more balsa control line models. My friends built balsa models as well. We flew until we ran out of glow fuel that we had purchased in tiny containers from the hobby shop. 2 years ago, I decided I would try flying control line again with an electric-powered control line. Many years ago, I had started a profile 15-size prop buster, so I installed an electric system that is equal to the 15 glow engine. First time flying, it was too windy and the lines were too long. A minor crash resulted in a fair amount of damage. The plane was repaired and flown several times, but I decided to build an 049 size trainer to learn on again. I built this control line model from plans I found somewhere. Power was a Cox 15 reed valve engine. Not sure that I ever flew the airplane. I did use a Cox 15 and a Junior Satan and a Profile P40. I remember flying a Voodoo using rear pressure tap with the insert and the Venturi removed. The engine cut out at a bad time and the airplane crashed. A friend of mine built a Goldberg Half-A Viking free flight and gave it to me when completed. I put a worn-out Babe B on it, no timer or DT. I always put a small amount of fuel in it and luckily avoided thermals, but lost it in some really tall grass. Recently, someone sold me a Half-A Viking kit. I plan to build it in the future. I was given a Goldberg Buster control line and flew it first with a Fox 19 and later with the 35. The front of the model was getting really fuel soaked, but I replaced some of the wood and it will fly again. Besides control line model airplanes, My friends and I built Estes rockets. One time when we were launching rockets, someone was flying a radio-controlled plane. My friend and I talked our fathers into getting us beginner radio control airplanes. For his first RC airplane, my friend had the Foam Ranger 42, powered by an OS Max 10. My father purchased a used setup that was obsolete at the time. The radio was a type known as reeds. It was not proportional, and you could only give one control at a time. To fly, you kept bumping toggle switches on the transmitter. The plane, known as a Nova, was powered by a Vico 19. With about a dozen flights with an instructor, I was flying on my own. I was 13 years old at the time. One of the best things about the RC model airplane hobby was there was a club for this in the city I lived in. We could get help learning to fly, and there were regular club meetings. At most meetings there were films shown. I think they were loaned by the AMA. Joining the AMA meant we received a monthly magazine also. After the first season of flying the Reeds plane, my dad could see I was serious about the hobby and bought me a World Engines Blue Max proportional system. To save money, we purchased the system in semi-kit, which means circuit boards had to be wired. There was a lot of fine soldering to do. The radio did not work when completed, but there was a local guy in the club who fixed it up. For an airplane, I purchased a used airplane at the club auction, a Midwest Sky Squire. Flying a proportional RC system should be much easier than Reed's, but it took me some time to get the feel of it. I decided to build a new plane for the Reed system as a Nova was getting rather heavy. Midwest Esquire looked like a real stable design for the Reed's radio. On the first flight I lost all control right after takeoff. It made climbing circles until the 2-ounce tank was empty. We heard the motor quit but could not see the airplane as it was so high. A couple of weeks later the phone rang. Someone had found the plane several miles away. The only problem was the farmer's cows walked on the wing and caused some damage. I repaired the plane and flew it with proportional RC gear. I later sold the plane to someone learning to fly. On his first flight, he handed the transmitter to his instructor when in trouble and the plane crashed. The instructor noticed the switch on the transmitter was turned off. He asked the student why he turned off the switch. Student replied, "With power tools, when you get in trouble, the first thing you do is turn off the power switch." My father built a Midwest Tri-Squire, but I flew it much of the time. On one evening, the only other person flying was flying a Tri-Squire. I followed his plane and he went up into a loop. The bottom of the loop was at the top of my plane. It cut off the vertical fin and it went into a flat spin. That was the only damage besides the tire tracks across the wing. The first contest flying I did was a new type of RC pylon racing at the time, known as quarter midget. 15 glow engines were used. I built a Spirit of St. Louis for plans as it looked pretty easy, powered by an OS Max 15. When our club had the first race with experts from another club, we quickly found out that an OS 15 doesn't cut it. The guys in our clubs purchased the K&B and Super Tiger 15 engines. I built another fuselage for the Spirit and installed a Super Tiger 15. Our club also had half-A racing along with the quarter midget racing for a time. My first racer was the Ace Upstart, but then I built a plane I saw in a magazine article that was really fast. It had a V-tail and only one aileron. It used a Kern needle valve and crankcase pressure. In later races I was running 60% nitro. The other people flying this event were really beginners. I won every race, which became boring after a while, and I went back to the quarter midget racing. Someone in the local club gave me a foam core wing that tapered towards the tip. I designed an Air Cobra because it had tricycle gear. This way a rudder servo was not needed if you kept the landing gear tracking straight. For power I purchased the new Cox Conquest 15 engine. At the time there was a $60 limit put on the engine price as people were winning with really expensive engines. This engine sold for $59.95. It was really powerful and I had a plane that flew fast as I could handle. Actually, I was scared the entire race, but that was what made it exciting. My father and I had several radio systems as the price went down. As my piloting skills improved, I wanted a faster and more aerobatic airplane. I built the Cherokee Babe, which was powered by an OS-40. Plenty of power. This airplane lasted a long time until the fuselage was starting to get fuel-soaked. My friends and I tried RC boats for a time. I built the 049 size swamp buggy and started using the Cox Golden Bee 049, but ended up using the OS Max 15. I started building a pay-and-pack hydroplane, but building a model with epoxy was a pain. A friend of mine finished it and installed an OS-20. We ran it and it seemed rather slow. My friend gave it to me without the radio, but I never ran it again. My father and I went through a period of building really large model airplanes powered by chainsaw engines. My father created the prop adapter and the mounting for the airplane. Most of the engines were 30cc. We started with a big low-wing model, the Omen, that was purchased at a club auction. It was underpowered by the Guillow engine the owner had used, but the chainsaw engine pulled it fine. I designed a plane that looked sort of like the Aero Commander 100. It used a lot of foam board in the construction. My father built a couple of planes that looked like the Cessna 150. He bent thin plywood over the fuselage framework. My first plane crashed shortly after takeoff on one flight due to radio problems. It was then decided that I would buy a Kraft Sport radio. The next plane crashed really hard when the wing pulled off at the bottom of a loop. Before I knew the wing mounting was not strong enough for loops, I thought I would make kits of the Aero Commander 100. I drew up plans and started cutting out parts. I only sold one that was almost constructed. Not long after I purchased the Kraft radio, the FCC came out with new frequencies that had to be used. I could have had my radio converted, but I took a break from model airplanes for about 10 years. For one thing, this is when I became interested in computers and went back to college to get a 4-year degree in computer science.